The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 119. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to this week's show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Countdown to kickoff, 17 days. We're already a week into practice as we get closer and closer to the big season opener with Alabama down in Dallas. On today's Michigan Insider segment, we're going to preview the Wolverine offense. Our guest will be Michigan beat writer Kyle Meinke from AnnArbor.com. Before Kyle joins us, let's start as we do each week with our view from Section 17, a look at headlines of interest to Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Sunday was Michigan Media Day, and while there wasn't much in the way of news leaking out of camp, Coach Brady Hoke did address the press and shared some thoughts on the first week of practice. Here are some bullet points from that address. Fitz Toussaint and Frank Clark started practicing with the team on Monday. They are still suspended and waiting to see what's next in the process. Roy Roundtree underwent arthroscopic surgery on his knee last Friday. Just a cleanup job according to Coach Hoke. Roy will miss 2 weeks, but should be ready for the opener. Coach Hoke likes the intensity of the early practices thus far. He said that playing Alabama in the opener is a great challenge and a great opportunity. He also said he's not impressed or worried that his team is ranked so high in the early polls. He said it's not where you start, but where you finish that really matters. Coach Hoke also said he is very pleased with the improvement he's seen in Denard Robinson. His fundamentals, how he sees the field, and his leadership have all been very impressive. We'll have more from Coach Hoke's Media Day presser coming up later in the show on Wolverine Quick Hits. Even if Fitz doesn't play in the opener, we all expect that this year's offense is going to be explosive and potentially more productive than last year's. This week, Michigan beat writer Kyle Meinke from AnnArbor.com joins me on our Michigan Insider segment with his thoughts on this year's Wolverine offense. That's next, here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. Joining us today on our Michigan Insider segment as we preview the Michigan offense for this upcoming season, Michigan beat writer Kyle Meinke from AnnArbor.com. It's been a long time, Kyle. Great to have you back talking football.
Sounds great, Mike. Glad to be back.
If we could, just using a very unofficial two-deep chart that I have, Kyle, let's start with the running back position. And we all know following last season, then spring, we thought most of us that we were in pretty good shape, with Fitz Toussaint, Vincent Smith, and Thomas Rawls sort of emerging. But what happened with Fitz Toussaint and his off-field incident a couple of weeks ago has sort of thrown that into a tailspin a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, been through all of last year with that tailback competition, all of last camp, trying to find their lead guy. Eventually landed on Fitz Toussaint as a starter, and then he finally took over as a featured back about midway through last season, and coaches were immensely happy with him, as well they should have been. He rushed for more than 1,000 yards last year. He was definitely the guy coming into this year, but all of a sudden, right before camp, they were thought to be kind of doubling back a little bit on that competition just because his status for Alabama at this point is unclear. And I personally would be surprised to see him play. So that kind of threw a wrench into everything. He's still the number one guy, just a matter of when he can play. If he does sit out time, and again, I think he will, I think you'll see Thomas Rawls kind of emerge to the top of that depth chart. Al Borges, the offensive coordinator, already has signaled that'll be the case. But if Justice Hayes or someone else has a real great camp, they wouldn't hold back in playing him as well. But I would expect that Thomas Rawls will be the guy that takes over for Fitzgerald primarily. And then, of course, Vincent Smith's still in the discussion as well. He's a senior this year. He's actually Michigan's most experienced back, carries-wise. But Al Borges said that he prefers something more of a third down and change of pace, that type of role. So Vincent Smith, I think, is Fitzgerald's primary backup, if you will, is change of pace back. But with Fitzgerald now, I think Thomas Rawls will actually ascend to the lead back role, and Vincent Smith will kind of retain that same similar type of third down role.
Well, Kyle, I know at the press conference last week, Coach Hoke was asked several times about Fitzgerald Toussaint and his status, and he said he will deal with that when he deals with it. But there's still really no timetable on when we're going to get some news on this, is there?
Yeah, no, I think that's a two-pronged thing. That I think, first of all, it'll depend on how Fitzgerald handles the in-house consequences. Brady Hoke hasn't released, or no one's released, what he has to do to get back with the team. But I assume it has something to do with running a few steps and waking up early and those kinds of things that guys have to go through when they have run. And his status for that game or whenever he can come back, I think will depend a little bit on that. So it hasn't even been determined, I would guess, because of that. And then also with I think there's some gamesmanship in there too. You know, the longer that you can wait to announce something like that, the more you leave Alabama kind of up in the air for what they can expect. I don't think a decision's been made yet because he has some things to do in-house. And I think even when it's made, Michigan will hold off a little bit, making an announcement, just the gamesmanship factor going into that game against Alabama.
Well, Kyle, if and when Fitz Toussaint gets back into the lineup, we've got, as we mentioned, Vincent Smith and Thomas Rawls. Do you now consider that, for the first time in quite a few years, a position of strength?
It's getting there. I'm not exactly ready to proclaim that position of strength, only because I really like Fitz Toussaint, but Vincent Smith, he's limited as a back. He's not a guy you throw in there and expect to get 100, 150 yards from. He's a guy who's going to catch a couple of passes and screens, and he's a really, really effective pass blocker. That's kind of what he is. And then Thomas Rawls, he has all this potential. We kind of saw it the spring game when he was the team's leading rusher and scored going 2 touchdowns this game. You know, coaches just raved about the guy, and they've raved about him since he first got into campus last year. At the same time, he's only rushed 13 times in his career. He's an inexperienced guy, and tailback's the position definitely where, a guy like Mike Hart, kind of the exception, a guy who's pretty effective, pretty prolific right from the start as a freshman. It takes some time, and even saw that last year with Toussaint. You know, his best games were his last 5 to 6 games, and that was kind of after he had won some snaps under his belt. And his vision got better. That's the thing he always talked about with his vision. He saw the holes faster. So a guy like Thomas Rawls, I'd expect to undergo a similar process. And so at this point, I see talented guys in Michigan's backfield, but I still see it a little raw. And of course, with the whole Toussaint situation, he's up in the air right now. So not yet, but getting there and very close, and I can see that day coming.
Okay, well, let's talk about the guy who will be blocking for the tailbacks, running backs, the fullbacks. Right now, number 1 on the depth chart, Stephen Hopkins. I know Coach Hoke has said several times this week he's bigger, he's stronger, and seems to have really adapted to being a fullback very well. You've got Joey Carriage behind him, and a young freshman, Homa. I'm not sure how to pronounce that first name. I've never mastered that yet, but what do you think of the fullback situation?
Yeah, I really like the Michigan's fullback situation. It'll be kind of interesting to see how Al Borges uses that position, because a guy like Stephen Hopkins, who is recruited as tailback, a bigger tailback, but still a tailback, and now he's switched to fullback. That gives them all kinds of options at that position. He's really a very diverse kind of fullback, that he can not only block, obviously, but he can rush the ball like a tailback. He's a little bit faster than your typical fullback, and he can also catch balls out of the backfield. So I think going into the season, you're going to hear all kinds of stuff about how Borges will use Devin Gardner and the two quarterback sets that he used last year and all that kind of stuff, the deuce formation, if you want to call it that. But I think fullback's going to be kind of a wrinkle that's going to fly under the radar a little bit. And I think you'll see some creative uses out of Steph Hopkins once we get into the season. And then, the depth at the position, they're going to try to redshirt the fullback that you mentioned. I'm not sure to pronounce it either, but I think it's Fuma, the last name. I think they'll try to redshirt him. And they have a couple of walk-ons. Hoke does like Joey Carriage. You might see him get a couple of snaps. But fullback's not really a position you need typically a ton of bodies at. I'd expect to see a lot of Hopkins and like I said, I'm really eager to see how Borges uses him because he's about as skilled as you'll ever see in a fullback.
Yeah, agree with that. Let's move out to the wide receiver position, which is a group that, at least going into the season, doesn't have a lot of depth. Roy Roundtree moving to the outside. There have been a lot of questions about, can he be a guy at 6 foot who can be that downfield guy? He's more suited, I think all of us agree, to the slot, but he and Dillio are going to be on one side, Dillio behind Roy Roundtree, and then Jeremy Gallon backed up right now, at least penciled in, Jeremy Jackson, Gerald Robinson. Not a lot of depth there, is there, Kyle?
Not at all. and part of the problem is that you've lost two of your top guys. Of course, Junior Hemingway, who was the number one receiver last year, but you also got Daryl Stone. He was expected to be a starter, if not Michigan's number one guy this year. I think if he comes back, he's probably in that flanker spot, not Roy Roundtree. And Roundtree can kind of stay where he was last year. But so Michigan's losing two really pivotal guys for them, and a receiver. And receiver's a position, at least the past couple of years, that hasn't been, and especially last year, that hasn't been particularly productive. And we saw the huge drop in Roundtree's numbers. He was at 72 catches in 2010. Last year, just 19. And he's kind of the poster boy for that, the diminished production at receiver. And of course, this is a dual thing. This isn't on the receivers. It's the Denard Robinson accuracy thing a little bit too. I'm sure we'll get to Denard in a few minutes. But receiver is a big question mark right now because you didn't have much production last year, and you lost your number one guy in Junior Hemingway. And Denard, he's not particularly accurate, or he hasn't been yet anyway. And so a guy like Junior Hemingway, who's a big guy, he's like 6'1", but a big body. He was so adept on those jump balls and kind of gave Denard a little bit of leeway, if you will, on his passes. He didn't have to be quite as crisp. I think with a guy like Roundtree, he's more of a nuanced pass catcher, so I think Denard has to be more targeted with a guy like Roundtree, or even a guy like Gallon. Gallon can jump through the roof, but he's still only like 5'8", 5'9". So I think that loss will be really felt. And then, of course, you mentioned the depth. There's not a lot of depth. You get guys like Gillia's a nice player, but he's not really a starter-type material, I don't think. He's a possession-type receiver, if you will. And you got Jeremy Jackson. I think you have a couple of freshmen. I would really expect to see Amara Darbo, a true freshman. I think he'll make an impact this year. Michigan needs size on the outside. He's a big kid, almost as big as Hemingway was. And he could be a third starter next to Roundtree and Gallon. Yeah,
when you look at this receiving core, Kyle, Roundtree, Gallon, Dillio, they're slot receivers. Dillio's a possession receiver, very good at that. Jackson and Robinson, have more of the body type, the taller, rangier wide receivers that we really need. And you're right, Darbo might have to come in and make an impact. Is there anyone else in that freshman class you expect or have heard is going to get their shot?
Jay Chesson, he's two-man recruiting class at receiver. Amara Darbo from Iowa and Jay Chesson from Missouri. And from everything I hear, Darbo's ahead of Chesson. Chesson's a really fast guy, but he's just a little bit more raw, and he's skinnier too. Darbo is huge. He's like 225 pounds, I think. Like 220, 225 right now. He stands 6'2". I mean, that's a big kid. That's Junior Hemingway size. And I'm not sure yet. We haven't seen him play, so we have no idea if it's good weight or bad weight. But judging from what I've heard, and I talked to Amara earlier this summer, it seems like he's a guy that's pretty much college ready. And Michigan needs size on the outside. It needs size at receiver. Like I said, they lost Hemingway in Canada. That big presence. And you have Roundtree and you have Gallon, but those guys are, they're not what Hemingway was. And I think Darbo's more in that vein, and you could see him in there. The other guy he's contending with is Gerald Robinson. He was the leader for the third starting receiver spot coming out of spring camp. He's a sophomore who's played very little, but Brady Hoke seems to really like him on the outside. So I think you'll either see Gerald Robinson or Amara Darbo secure that third starting spot. Okay, well, I think it's safe to say at the wideouts we lack depth, and we just have question marks right now. And, of course, we'll start to see some answers once the season gets underway. It's a developmental position this year. Let's move to the quarterback position. And, of course, we've been talking Denard Robinson since the season ended in January. Then in spring, we all know it's Denard's senior year. It's his last hurrah, and that he has to improve on the accuracy. It's his second year in Coach Borges' offense. So much rides on Denard Robinson when it comes to this offense. Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's the face of the team, and that's what he should be. He's a third-year starting quarterback, and he's such an interesting case, because he's so prolific. He puts up just absurd numbers, and yet, I mean, many would call him a one-dimensional player. So his running is it's so great, and granted, he had fewer rushing yards last year than he did in his first year as a starter in 2010, but he was just as effective. His yards per carry and all that kind of stuff were all similar. And Michigan's offense as a whole actually increased its scoring by half a point per game. So it's actually a better offense. I think that was kind of all a product of kind of moving the ball around and the emergence of just out in the backfield that kind of just took some pressure off Denard, and that's not a bad thing. Smaller numbers, but he was just as good, I thought, in the running game. And of course, he draws in all those eyes, which helps to free up guys in the running game and even in the passing game. The big thing I look for from Denard, and I'm not exactly breaking it down here, but it's the passing game. And he's been so good in the running game, and last year was so bad in the passing game. Big Ten worst, 15 interceptions, only completed 55% of his passes. I think if he can become an average passing quarterback, which I think he can, I think he's going to be great this year. I really do. I expect to see him really take a step forward because he doesn't have to be a great passing quarterback, and if you think of he's average compared with what he can do in the running game and all the talent Michigan has back at the skill position, I really do look for a better season from Denard.
Well, the one thing that he has to do in the passing game is cut down those interceptions, though.
Yep, absolutely. 15 interceptions is a lot. It was sixth most last year. And I don't have the number in front of me, but his interceptions per pass attempts per interception was terrible, like 13 or 14 passes for every interception, which is like a 11 or 12-year low for Michigan. So it was not good, and especially in the Big Ten season. But I will say that in the last, if you throw out Virginia Tech, in the last 3 or 4 games of the Big Ten season, he was pretty good, and especially in those last 2 games against Nebraska and Ohio State. He did a better job of holding onto the ball, and he was a better passer too. So that's what Coach Hoke pointed to a little bit. This camp is just that he did improve, especially with the interceptions down the stretch last year, and they're looking for that growth continued into next season. The 2 biggest things I think that could lead to diminished interceptions are the improved footwork. Denard's notorious for throwing off his back foot. He says he's fixed that, but no one's seen him play yet, so we'll see what happens there. And then just better recognition of the coverage schemes against him. He would throw sometimes right into double teams when there's another guy open or something like that. It wasn't necessarily truly just bad accuracy. It was failed recognition of defensive schemes. And so I know he's immersed himself in film in the off-season. And in his 3rd year as starting quarterback and in his 2nd year of the Borges scheme, I think you'll have a better grasp of what defenses are trying to do to stop him, and it could lead to a diminished interception number.
Well, let's hope so. His backup is Devin Gardner, and of course we've been hearing a lot of things about Devin Gardner. In the spring he was working out a wide receiver. With camp getting underway this week, Coach Borges has said, well, he's going to work out a wide receiver and he's going to get snaps. How much he's going to see at wide receiver, I guess, maybe they just don't want us to know right now, but he's still the number 2 guy at quarterback. Most people feel like you've got to get Devin Gardner on the field somehow.
Yeah, and one of those guys is Al Borges.
Yeah,
so that's why you're seeing this. Is Al Borges? He said the other day, he put it real nicely. It's just basically the guy is so athletic that I'm a bad coach if he's standing next to me on a sideline during the game. I come back to the spring game. We haven't seen him a ton. We saw him scatter snaps here and there last season, but in the spring game, I don't know if there's a more athletic person on the field than Devin Gardner. And Denard didn't play in the game. Obviously, he's a different case. But in that game, the guy's huge. And he's fast. And he's 6'4". And we already talked about the lack of size of wideout. If Devin Gardner comes to a point where he can play 10 snaps a game or something at receiver, I think that's a major asset for Michigan. Partially maybe as a decoy, but even actually using him at that position. I envision him as being a red zone disaster for teams, the way he can jump in his size, and obviously Denard needs weapons out there that he can throw to, especially bigger guys. I'm not sure if he's going to make a move full time. I think that'll depend slightly, at least, on the development of Russell Bellamy as the number 2, number 3 guy. Right now he's the number 3 guy, but if he continues to improve to the point where coaches feel confident and the keys to the offense, and Denard should go down, then you might see Devin Gardner get some more snaps at receiver. But as of right now, I think they're more comfortable with Gardner as a number 2 quarterback. And, of course, we know that Denard, and by the nature of having a dual threat quarterback, he goes down every once in a while. You need to have a guy who's ready in that backup role. So that'll play into the thinking as well with how they end up using Devin Gunner, receiver, and quarterback, or how that all breaks down.
And Kyle, it sounds like the coaching staff really likes Russell Bellamy, that he had an impressive spring, and they have a lot more confidence in him going into the season.
Absolutely, yeah. They've been really high on him since the spring. I think that's the first time I started hearing them talk about Bellamy since development. I thought he looked pretty good in the spring. His arm strength is his biggest weakness right now. He's not going to wob you with zips on his ball or anything, but he moved the offense, and he was steady, and he didn't make very many mistakes. And really, if you're talking about a backup quarterback, you don't need much more than that. You don't need a guy who's going to save the day every time out. You just need a guy who's going to move the offense and not turn over the ball. So I think that's kind of the point to which they want to get Bellamy. And I'll also say that this offseason, I was talking to one of the former players from last year's team who played on offense, and he said that Bellamy threw maybe the nicest balls of the three quarterbacks. So you can take that for what it's worth, but it seems like players and coaches really are pleased with the development of Russell Bellamy.
Okay, well, we're in pretty good shape at the quarterback position. I think we all agree. Let's move to the trenches where I think we're all nervous with the depth. Of course, who's blocking for Denard and Fitz and the guys? We finally have some experience up front for the most part. Let's start at that center position, which fascinates me and worries me at the same time. We know we lost David Moak there, and what we lost in David Moak when he graduated. Ricky Barnum moves over to that center position. Coach Hoke loves his feet, loves his technique, says he's a smart guy. Huge transition for Ricky Barnum, though.
Right, and they do seem to like Ricky Barnum. We just talked yesterday about Ricky Barnum with Coach Hoke, and he's pleased with his progress. And it sounds like Barnum and Denard Robinson took a lot of snaps together this summer. I mean, like every day they worked out, they were doing snaps together just to develop a rhythm. Barnum's played the position before. He played it a little bit in high school, and then he played it kind of behind the scenes a little bit the past couple of years. So he's taking snaps and, in case something happened to Moak or whatever. But so it's not, so Denard taking snaps from Ricky Barnum isn't a totally foreign thing. But also we saw last year in the Sugar Bowl when David Moak went down and couldn't go on that first series, what can happen when you mess with the rhythm a little bit, especially at game speeds, and you have the crowd noise and all that kind of stuff, which I would expect to hear at Michigan, Alabama. That's going to be an issue. So they really worked hard this offseason to develop rhythm between the two. And I think, Ricky, if you look at his stature, he's built like a center, and he's kind of low to the ground, a little stocky guy. And I thought he was pretty good at left guard when he was healthy. I think the move will be just fine. He's not going to be David Moak, okay? No. I mean, David Moak's a once-a-decade or more type of guy. He's one of the best centers in Michigan history, and Michigan's had some pretty good centers come through its doors. So I don't think he's going to be David Moak, but he can be a steady center, and that's really all you can ask for is a guy who can get the quarterback the ball and be pretty good. And for me, the biggest thing with Ricky Barnum is his health. It's been a problem throughout his career. Almost every year, I think he's been hurt for stretches. And last year, he was supposed to be the left guard, starting left guard. But he only started like 3 or 4 games because of he had a 1-game suspension to start the season, and then he had ankle problems, both ankles. So I think that'll be the big key for him is whether or not he can stay healthy.
Well, I think that's the situation for the entire offensive line. Can they stay healthy? What injuries do we sustain up front? Because backing Ricky Barnum up right now is it's Jack Miller, isn't it?
And Jack hasn't played yet, so it's a little disconcerting. And I think, I think that's it, because none of the 4 freshmen who came in, the freshman offensive linemen, are centers, and Jack Miller's the only other guy on the roster, I think, who's a scholarship center. So I think it's Ricky Barnum and Jack Miller. That's
going to be a position to watch, we all know. Flanking Ricky Barnum at the guards, Elliot Mueller, who, coming out of spring ball was listed as the left guard, but he was battling with Brzezinski. Is that the situation heading into camp or after the first week, too?
Yep. Yeah, we talked about that extensively yesterday. I talked to Brady Hoke, I talked to Taylor Lewan and Patrick Omane, the right guard, all about the situation on left guard. And no one was really saying much on the development competition, but they said a little bit about the 2 guys. And I talked to Hoke in Chicago a couple of weeks ago about Brzezinski specifically, because Brzezinski, he's a sophomore walk-on. He's kind of an interesting case because no one's heard of the guy coming into this spring. But apparently he was really turning some heads the last fall camp and then really turned a corner in the spring. And I remember early in spring camp, Hope really praising Elliot Mueller and saying he'd be the guy at left guard, or he was the leader to be the guy at left guard, I should say. And then all of a sudden in the spring game, you see Joey Brzezinski there. And it's a walk-on that no one's heard of at that point. But Taylor Lewan, who plays left tackle, plays right next to Brzezinski in practice, just says this guy's leverage is unbelievable. And Brzezinski doesn't do anything extraordinarily well, but he does everything good enough, and that his leverage is his best suit. You know, he's just Brady Hoke in Chicago called it. He's just a pain. That's the way he described Joey Brzezinski. And that's kind of what you want as an offensive lineman, a guy who makes it difficult for defensive linemen to get to the quarterback, to get to the ball carrier. And that's kind of what Brzezinski is. He's not a guy who's really going to lie with his size or speed or athleticism, but he's effective and he makes plays routinely. He's pretty consistent. So that's Brzezinski's case, and he appears to be the leader right now at left guard, just based off his spring and then starting in the spring game and the reports I've gotten this fall. And then, of course, the other guy is Elliot Mueller. And it's kind of a tough case because he was a really highly touted kid coming out of high school in Ohio. And then, he hasn't really played very much at Michigan. I think he was kind of beset a little bit by making a lot of position changes, bouncing around all over the offensive line. He couldn't really settle in anywhere. And he's finally doing that at left guard, but it seems like I think he's getting nosed out right now by Brzezinski. We'll see what happens. Brady Hoke said that he expects to make a decision hopefully within a week and a half. So maybe sometime at the beginning of not next week, but the week after that. So that's where those two guys are at. Kyle Kalis, a true freshman, is also in the competition, but I think Michigan's going to be really, really reluctant to start a true freshman on the offensive line at left guard against Alabama and that defensive line on national TV. I don't think it'll happen right away. Kalis might enter the conversation at some point, especially with real depth issues all over the line. So I think they're going to want to season a guy who's capable, and I think maybe he's the most capable of all the backups, coming Chris Bryant. But so I think he'll see the field at some point. But I'd be highly surprised if he wins the job at left guard, at least coming out of the gate.
Yeah, I think we all don't want to see Kyle Kalis yet. I'm excited to see him in the future, but oh boy, if he gets playing time, it means some bad things have happened up front. The other guard, though, Patrick Omameh, just steady for the last 3 years for his entire Michigan career, poised to have a big season, needs to have a big season, and he really doesn't have a lot of backup over on that side either.
His backup's Chris Bryant. He redshirted last year. He actually played at left guard, but then in spring camp he played more at right guard. And so that's his backup. Coaches called Chris Bryant, who's the backup right now for Patrick Omameh. They called him one of the best practice young guys during bowl practices, which is a time when teams really focus on developing the guys for the following season. And Chris Bryant, remember, was a name that Brady Hoke and Al Borges both brought up quite a bit. So I think he's a pretty capable guy, and I think Omameh's a senior this year. So I think Chris Bryant's probably your right guard of the future going into the 2013 season. But for this year, Patrick Omameh is back. He's a senior, lots of starts under his belt. He's one of Michigan's most seasoned guys, and he's the most experienced guy on Michigan's offensive line. Taylor Lewan, the left tackle, is a better player. That guy's unbelievable. But Patrick Omameh has been around for longer. I think this is his third full season of starting all at right guard. So he's steady. He's kind of he's not going to wow you, but he's going to block you every single time. He's going to be pretty steady and not make a ton of mistakes. I think the number one area coaches want to see him develop is in his pulling. I think that was maybe the one weakness he had last year. But other than that, he's a pretty solid guy. Not a lot of questions regarding Patrick Omameh in right guard on an offensive line with a lot of questions. I think he's going to be kind of a balance for that line this year. The tackle positions, Taylor Lewan, he's just incredible. Michael Schofield's going to be over on the right side, right tackle. He just looks like a right tackle when you see him on the field. But wow, what a big year for Taylor Lewan. A lot of people are already saying this could be his last year on campus. Everyone expects a huge year from Lewan. Yeah, and you mentioned the last year thing. That was kind of the early storyline. He got asked that a lot at Big Ten Media Days, and maybe that'll subside a little bit at least in this season. I don't know, but he's already being projected as a top 15 pick. So I think that he was good as a redshirt freshman. He was really good last year as a sophomore, and now he's entering his junior year. He's played 22 of 26 games in his career. And he's an unbelievable guy. I mean, he's huge, and he's gone up against some of the best defensive ends in the Big Ten, some guys who've been early round picks in the NFL draft and really held his own. So I think Michigan really likes what they have in Taylor Lewan. The thing about Taylor is he's really tough too. I don't know if people realize just how many injuries that guy went through last year. And I remember against Michigan State, he had a bum ankle and a broken hand and broken finger, not a hand, but a broken finger, like all these things, and he still played through all of it. He's a warrior, and that's what Michigan needs. Not only a left tackle, a guy protecting Denard's blind side, but also on a line that's so thin on depth. So I think they really like what they have at left tackle and Taylor Lewan. And then at right tackle, you mentioned Mike Schofield. He hasn't started there before, but he came into school and he's as a tackle, and he definitely fits the profile of a tackle. And coaches and players have really raved about him in the Bear, and I think that's a position he'll be just fine at. He played a lot of offensive line last year as that left guard, but he definitely got seasoned last year. So he's making the move to tackle, which is a more difficult position to play at end guard. But I think he'll make a move just fine. I don't think he'll get the production that you get out of Taylor Lewan, but he's going to be just fine and a very capable replacement for Mark QE.
Well, Kyle, if this offensive line can avoid the injuries, which is always, it's always iffy. We know that going into a season. This will be a very, very good unit, don't you think?
I think it has potential to be. The left guard thing is a big problem, and then Ricky Barnum's injury history to me, that's the second biggest issue with the offensive line, because he's just had so many issues trying to stay healthy. And last year, it wasn't even one freak thing that happened to him. It was like he had problems with both ankles on several occasions. And he said, I remember him saying in the spring that it had something to do with his technique, that the way he played, the way he shuffled his feet playing offensive line made him more injury prone. And that he's trying to fix that, but you never know. And he's had so many injuries that he's probably, I would say, more prone for injury going forward, especially with the ankles. Temperamental body part. And if he goes down, we already talked about it. If he goes down, talk about Jack Miller, who's a redshirt freshman, and he's never played a snap before.
Yeah.
And he's relatively undersized position, fairly decent handle on the playbook, but a little undersized. Just not a very strong guy at this point in his career. So there's a big drop off between the two, and I'm really concerned about what happens if Barnum does go down.
The last position is tight end, and this, of course, is another position that doesn't have a lot of depth. Brandon Moore sort of penciled in right now. Ricardo Miller, who I'm not sure of his weight. He just doesn't seem like he has a tight end body, but they say he's gotten bigger. But what do you think of that position?
It's a position of great uncertainty. It has a lot of the same issues that receiver does, in that it's just there was some turnover. I mean, Michigan's losing its top two guys, and Kevin Kloger and Steve Watson. They lost one of its top recruits at that position for 2012, Farrell Brown. At one point, he was thought to be a contender for playing time this year. And then, of course, tight end wasn't a position truly featured in Rich Rodriguez's offense, and so he didn't really recruit the position. And when he did, he didn't really recruit it in earnest. So Michigan didn't get premium tight ends for a number of years there. So there's a giant gap on the depth chart at tight end. So basically, you lose your top two guys and one of your top recruits at a position you didn't recruit for a number of years.
Yeah.
And that spells I don't want to say disaster, but you end up with no depth at the position, which is what Michigan's facing now. And they like what they have in Brandon Moore. He's a fifth-year senior. That's the nice part. He's a first-time starter, but at least he's been around and in the system, and he's had some time to bulk up and to get a better feel for everything, as opposed to just throwing out a young guy in there as a first-time starter. But yeah, he'll be the guy. Brady Hoke said what he's looking for in Brandon Moore this camp is to become a more aggressive player, a more physical player, and that's something you really need at tight end. And I think Brandon Moore will be fine in the passing game. I think what they're really concerned now about is about him as a pass protector, as someone who's going to be a physical presence at tight end, especially in this power run game they want to kind of start to implement a little bit. And especially with the emergence of Tucson in the backfield and all that kind of stuff, they really need someone who can block. And then at the second tight end spot, which was played last year by Steve Watson, and you might see a true freshman. I wouldn't be surprised to see A.J. Williams play that spot. You mentioned Ricardo Miller, but he's bounced around a lot. And Hoke said right now he's playing the hook receiver and tight end, which to me signals that he's not playing either.
Yeah.
And I think that you might see A.J. Williams. He's 280 pounds, which is he's built like an offensive lineman, but that's kind of what you want on that second tight end. When he goes out there in those formations, you want a guy who's just going to kick butt in the blocking game, and who's going to spring, either Denard or Tucson or whomever, through the blocking game. So I would not be surprised to see A.J. Williams on the tight end. Devin Funchess, another freshman, he could get some time again because of the whole depth issue. He's much more slightly built than what A.J. Williams is. I think punches is around 240 or 250. So I think, but he might be the team's most proficient pass catcher. So I think that's when they would use him, if they do in fact use him. And the final guy I would keep an eye on is, I'll probably butcher the name, but Mike Kwiatkowski. He's a walk-on, a senior. He's never played. No one's heard of him. But a couple of former players told me in the off season that he was really solid last year on the scout team. I mean, really solid. And sometimes playing on the level of a Steve Watson or a guy that played last year. And he's a walk-on, but he's a guy who could see some time based off that. And then actually this week, Brady mentioned him in the tight end hierarchy. So it seems like he's in coach's favor. He's a fifth-year senior in a position with no depth. So he might be a guy who sees the field as a walk-on.
So overall, you expect this to be a potent offense. Yes, there are question marks. I think we all realize that. If everything comes together, this should be another very good, tough offense to stop for opponents.
I agree. I think the offense takes a step forward, and that doesn't necessarily mean more point production because they play a more difficult schedule this year, and they play a lot of road games. So that's going to make things difficult. But I think in terms of the offense's overall proficiency, its ability to execute consistently, and especially decrease turnovers, I expect massive improvement, especially with Denard Robinson, a quarterback in his third year and his second year of the Borges scheme. I've heard it before with Denard. He's better. I see difference this year for the first time. I see a different Denard. He's more collected. He's really owned the whole leadership thing. I think it's really hit him what this year means, and he had a chance to go to the NFL in the off season. He looks to come back, and he appears to be pouring it all into it. And I think he really will take a step forward in the passing game. And like we've already mentioned, he doesn't have to be a great passing quarterback. He has to be an average passing quarterback to go along with what he can do in the run game. And I think that Michigan offense, because of that, and because of Toussaint being back, and I think they'll find answers in the offensive line. I do think Michigan's offense is better next year than it was last year.
I think you're right, and we'll find out in just a couple of weeks. Our guest on the show today has been Kyle Meinke, Michigan beat writer from AnnArbor.com, and we have been previewing the Wolverine offense. Kyle, as always, it's great to get your insight on Michigan football, and of course, the season just a couple of weeks away, and we look forward to getting you back on and talking during the season.
Sounds great, Mike. Let's do it again soon.
Always great to have Michigan beat writer Kyle Meinke from AnnArbor.com on the show. Kyle will be back with us once the season gets underway. Coming up, we close it out for another week with Wolverine Quick Hits right here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, it was Media Days this past weekend in Ann Arbor, and with 1 week of practice under the belt, Coach Hoke met the press for the second time. He started with a couple of in-house things. Roy Roundtree had arthroscopic surgery on last Friday. He had a little cartilage that he needed cleaned up. We expect him back in 2 weeks. It went great, he feels great, and it was just one of those things that he didn't do practicing. He just needed to get it done. He kind of felt it a little bit walking back to the huddle, to be honest with you. With him, he's one of the great kids on his football team, and as a senior, he's been a guy that will do a great job bouncing back. On Fitzgerald Toussaint and Frank Clark, they began practice on Monday. They are still obviously the guys who, as teammates, we love them. But there are consequences for their behavior, and they are paying the price, and they will continue to pay that price for a little bit. I think both of them realize they have an outstanding opportunity to play at the University of Michigan and get a great Michigan degree. They understand there is a standard of performance from the community and a standard of performance from the academic side, and there is a standard of performance from a football side that they have to do a great job and understand. As coaches, you are a teacher and you get an opportunity to teach life lessons. Believe me, they have paid a heavy price and will continue to pay a price for actions unbecoming of a Michigan football player. Tammany Carter has decided to leave Michigan. He is a great young man, tremendous kid, but he decided to leave, and I will leave it at that. On whether or not Fitzgerald Toussaint and Frank Clark will play against Alabama, I haven't made that decision, and I probably won't make that decision for a while. On how the start of Roy Rountree's season is impacted by his surgery. Having a scope to fix a little bit of cartilage, a lot of guys come back in 2 weeks. Our doctors do a great job, and we have a great medical staff here. They all do a great job, and I think everything went well from talking to them. You have a guy like Roy who is a committed guy. He's going to do everything in his power to get back. On what he's most excited about this season, to see the development and the seniors and what their leadership is. We'll find out a lot about ourselves continually every day. There's an expectation from them every day. It's part of growing up and maturing. I think a lot of those guys have. On whether he sees an elevated intensity in the team because of opening with Alabama. You come to play football at Michigan to play in those kind of ball games. You're expected to play and perform. Playing the defending national champs is always something that is a great challenge and a great opportunity. Going to play the game in a venue like the Cowboys Stadium in Arlington, I think is going to be a lot of fun. On whether he's concerned about being ranked so highly in the preseason. Our expectations are always the same, and that's to win the Big Ten championship. Year in and year out, that's what the expectation is for the Michigan football team. We don't really care too much about rankings. I think we were picked 5th in our division in the Big Ten a year ago, so that's how much those things mean. Like in life, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. We have to finish in everything that we do to prepare to be the best Michigan team that we can. On his concerns regarding the offensive and defensive lines, believe me, we could have the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive and defensive line, and I'd be concerned. Knowing the opponent that we're going to play against and watching them, I'm a defensive coach. And watching that offensive line, that's as good an offensive line as I've seen in college football. On his confidence in Thomas Rawls to be the starting running back if needed. I have confidence in all our backs. Thomas is a guy who has been here. Vince Smith has played a lot of football at Michigan. I think Justice Hayes is a young guy who we redshirted a year ago, and then you have Thomas. I think all 3 of those guys have had a good camp to this point. We're just scratching the surface of where we're at as a team. All 3 of those guys are doing a nice job. On what he's seen Denard Robinson improve in the offseason, I think his maturity and leadership on how he approaches the game from being a quarterback. What he's done in the offseason, watching football, watching technique, watching fundamentals. I think in all that part of it, I've seen growth. I've seen him take a more vocal, active role within the senior class. I think that's important. He's played a lot of snaps. From a fundamental standpoint, I think he's improved. We're going to talk about that all the time. He's still going to throw a ball off his back foot every now and then, and probably shouldn't throw a ball late over the middle, but he's improved in a lot of ways. I'm really proud of him. On whether it's possible for the team to have a better season but have a worse record. If we don't win the Big Ten championship, then we failed. We know what the goal is, and if we don't meet it, then we fail. It's pretty cut and dry. So those are a few things that Coach Hoke had to say after the first week of practice at Michigan Media Days last weekend. Don't forget to become a member here at GBMW. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership. Benefits include daily email reminders when a story is published or a mailbag question is answered. You also need to become a member for full participation on our always interesting message board. As a member here on GBMW, you can also take part in our popular Monday Night Live chat, which got started again this past week, with E-Rock Wolverine, Coach BT, Maze Man, Doc for Blue, World's Wolverine, and our hockey guru, Yostmeister. The Monday Night Live chat again started this past Monday with practice underway, so check out our site for more details. Join GBMW today and get your daily Maize and Blue fix of news and conversation. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership today. Then each Wednesday you can listen to the Michigan Man podcast. The show is now available as an Android app, which can be purchased from the Android App Store at Amazon.com. If you are an Apple person, you'll find our app in the iTunes App Store. If you listen to the show on your Apple device, please take a minute to give the show a review. It helps us a lot. Our listener lines are open 24/7 if you would like to call and leave a comment we can use on an upcoming show. Our number is 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Whatever's on your mind, the upcoming season, basketball, recruiting, or hockey, just give us a call, state your name, where you're calling from, and then give us your 2 cents worth. If you would rather not leave a voicemail, but still have a comment or suggestion for the show, just email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. I welcome your thoughts and opinions on anything maize and blue, and we'll have the email address and the phone number in our show notes just in case you didn't have a pen to jot that down. Thanks again to our guest today, Michigan football beat writer Kyle Meinke from AnnArbor.com. It was great to have Kyle back on the show. For the best in Wolverine football coverage, follow Kyle at www.annarbor.com. Next week, we're going to preview the defense. Our scheduled guest is E-Rock Wolverine from right here at GBMW. So tune in next week and get E-Rock's thoughts on Coach Madison and this year's Wolverine D. Thanks again to all our listeners who take the time to drop us a line from time to time with comments and suggestions. As always, thanks to our servicemen and women who listen to the show on the Armed Forces Internet Service. I enjoy your email and am proud to bring you news of your Wolverines as you serve our country so proudly and so far away from home. That's it for another week. Don't forget to join us next week when we preview this year's Michigan defense. That's next Wednesday, August 22nd. Until then, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!